So I would love to start off by talking to you about the Jesus that I grew up believing in. So clearly I'm a pastor's kid, which means I grew up in church and I grew up believing in Jesus. Like as I look back at my life, there's not a day that I can point to and be like, oh, I didn't know Jesus that day. And so he and I were really good friends, and loving him is really easy. I mean, when you're 7, loving Jesus is so easy, the easiest thing to do. And it was so easy to embrace his power. Like I remember being 5 or something and being stuck in traffic and believing that I could ask Jesus to take us out of traffic. And then when we got out of traffic, imagining that it was Jesus that picked up our car and took it out of traffic. Like that's the level. And I didn't think that was crazy. I didn't think that was a kid thing. I legitimately thought that Jesus was like that. But as I grew up, religion crept in. Like rules, regulations, perfectionism, performance, right? Started to creep into my story. And that Jesus that was my friend and was so close to me changed. He didn't change, but how I saw him changed. I started seeing him as far away and removed from my life. I started seeing him as strict. I started seeing him as condemning. And I saw myself as someone that he didn't want to be around because my life was such a mess or because I couldn't get it right. And I knew he was fully God. And in my mind, that meant that he was fully far away. Can anybody here relate? So I want to speak to those of us, because I think a lot of us here have probably been to church before, right? Most of us here have probably heard, like raise your hand if you heard the story of Jesus on the cross before coming here today. Yeah, that's a good majority of us, right? And we've heard about God, whether or not you've been in the church, because we're in America, like we hear about God. We hear conversations about what God is like. And I think some of us have this idea that God is this big, like bearded man sitting on a stone chair waiting for the day that you mess up. And I think that religion does that to us. Like this idea, religion in the terms of like, a set of rules that I have to follow in order to be a good person and in order to be close to God so that God isn't mad at me. But I don't think that that's how God actually is. I think that that's what we learned to believe because people kept telling us, you're not good enough. You're missing it. You're never gonna make it. God doesn't like that. God is annoyed at that. Or if you keep doing that, God's going to be mad at you. And maybe that's not what God is like. Yeah. Is anyone here, you don't have to raise your hand, but I can say that all of these things were true about me at one time. Okay. So is anyone here convinced that God is annoyed with you? Convinced, like, I know I said sorry last week, God, but I keep messing up. And I'm convinced that if I apologize one more time, I'm going to hear heaven roll his eyes. Like, I'm just going to hear it. I'm going to hear God be like, seriously, now you want to talk to me, right? And it's something that I tell, we have a discipleship class, and I tell them all the time, God is not petty. He's not passive-aggressively trying to make you understand how horrible of a person you are. That's not who God is. Okay, so is anyone here certain that yes, Jesus died on the cross for the sins of humanity, but there's no way that includes me? Because you don't know me. Because you don't know my story. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know the things I've said. You don't know the things I've done. You don't know the way that I've cursed God or the way that I blamed God for all of my problems. So Jesus can't possibly cover that. If that sounds familiar, this message is totally for you. You're in the right place. Is anyone here convinced that Jesus and God are distant and silent? They're outside. They're like, ooh, it looks like it's a mess down there. Good luck. And so I feel like this is the perfect day to talk about that because this is Saturday. So when we talk about Holy Week, right? Join me in the church history lesson for a second. When we talk about Holy Week, it's like the church has always practiced this week at remembering the last week of Jesus' life. So you start on Thursday, and Thursday you remember the meal he had with his disciples, where he washed their feet and taught them the Lord's Supper, right? He gave them bread and he said, this is my body broken for you. And he gave them wine and he said, this is the blood that is shed for you. Every time that you take this, remember me. So that's Thursday. On Friday, Jesus gets arrested and dies. On Saturday, silence. We are in the day of silence. And we can talk about resurrection and we can talk about power, but something that the Lord always puts on my heart is that it's okay to wrestle with him in the silence. It's okay that everything feels dead right now. Because in order for something to resurrect, it has to die. So if you're like, my life is dead, there is nothing, I am a hot mess, I'm dead, my faith is dead, everything is just done, you're in the perfect position to resurrect. The perfect place. So I want to invite you to use your imagination just for a second. I love to stick myself in the story of the Bible. So I want to invite you to join me. And let's go back in time 2,000 years to a people in a very different country and culture than you and I, but who wanted a lot of the same things that we want. They wanted freedom from oppression. They wanted justice for the poor and the oppressed. They wanted their voices to be heard. They wanted real change in their lives individually and nationally. They wanted something or someone to stand for them, right? And in walks Jesus, and he's got it all. He talks to those that everybody ignores. He's not scared of the people on the outside of society. He challenges religious teachers. He resists the oppression of the Roman Empire. He talks about God like he knows him, and he backs up his words with actions. So people get healed, captives get set free, and so many people want to hear what he has to say. So many people want to follow him around. They're literally following him from city to city to try to grasp what he's saying to get more of his power. In the crowds, you'll find that Jesus has actually made real friends. So there's a dozen of men and a handful of women that are his close friends, and he shares his heart with them. They know him on another level, and they're beginning to realize that he isn't just a good leader. He's not just a good speaker, but he's the Son of God. So he is God wrapped in flesh, walking around, living the fullness of human life. Think about it. Jesus stubbed his toe. Jesus felt alone. Jesus got hungry. Jesus wept. Jesus watched his friends die, and it hurt. Jesus lost his father, his adopted father, somewhere at an early age. His mom was a widow by the time Jesus died. Jesus was called names by his siblings, right? He's fully God, fully human. So he talks, he is walking around doing all of these things and actively working to pull heaven and earth closer together. And it's getting dangerous, right? The more he talks, the more the people in power are threatened. The more whispers of death threats are all around him, and so the more he has to travel in secret. This is Jesus. He's a real man with a real heart, with real thoughts and real emotions. This is Jesus, God made flesh, doing everything possible to make friends. God longing to connect to humanity, not like some big scary executioner, not figuring out who he can strike with lightning next, but just wanting to connect with humanity as a humble, loving shepherd. He is poor, he is homeless, he is uneducated, and he only hangs out with the people on the outside. Do you feel like an outsider? I think that means you'd be perfect for his group of friends. So on the last week of his life, Jesus had dinner with his friends. This is the dinner we were talking about, right? It was a dinner like any other, but then it wasn't. He was talking to them about how one of them was going to betray him. And then one of them left the room and they're like, oh, he probably went to go do an errand or something. And he washed all of their feet, setting the tone for the kind of world leaders they were called to be. And they all miss the point. They're all like, what is he talking about? What's going on here? Why is he washing our feet? And Jesus is like, well, I'm showing you that I can serve you. I'm showing you that if you want to follow me, if you want to be the greatest, you have to be the least. I am the kind of leader that will get down in the dirt with you and make you clean, right? And Peter doesn't really get it. And he's like, then wash all of me, Jesus. And he's like, that's not the point. I'm washing the parts of you that you're ashamed of. I'm washing the parts of you that you don't want me to touch because it's embarrassing. That is why Jesus washes the disciples' feet. And that is why he doesn't take Peter's, I think Peter was trying to make a joke. Then wash all of me, Jesus. Come on. And Jesus is like, Peter, it's not about that. The part of you that you want to hide, that's where I want to be. That's the part that I would love to heal the most. The part of you that you think is too dark for me, that's the part that I want to live in. He literally makes his home with the crushed in spirit. Literally, he builds his house with the brokenhearted. If you're brokenhearted, if you're crushed, you're the perfect candidate to live with Jesus. So he shares his heart with them, and he tries to prepare them. I was listening to the book of John. Daniela and I were listening to it, and Jesus is trying so hard to prepare his disciples, right? He's telling them, I'm telling you these things. The world hates me. They're going to hate you. You're going to be sad because something is going to happen to me, and you're going to mourn. He says, you're going to mourn for a little while, and then you're going to be happy, and it's going to be okay, but you're going to be sad, and people are going to hate you. And the disciples are like, what is he talking about? Does anyone know what he's saying? Because I don't understand. And Jesus is like, come on, guys, you need to get this. I am going to die. It is going to happen. And you will be offended and you will be hurt and it will be hard. But take heart, I have overcome the world. So I think so many times we think that people who follow Jesus, Christians, we're supposed to be happy. Everything's going to be okay. But Jesus never said that. He has a whole, all of John chapter 16 is him trying to tell his disciples, it's going to be hard. People are going to hate you. People are going to misunderstand you. It's not going to be easy. You're going to be on the outside. They're going to try to kill you. You're going to think that it's godly to try to kill you. You guys need to get this. You guys are going to be sad. It's going to be a struggle, but it's going to be exciting. It's going to be like a woman giving birth. You're going to have pain and it's going to be hard. But then at the end of the story, you'll see, and it's going to be so good. And his disciples are like, what is he saying? Help. So if you don't understand, you're also a great candidate to follow Jesus. His disciples literally spent half of their conversations with him asking, Jesus, what did you mean when you said that? Because I was listening, but also I have no idea what you said. But that's Jesus. When you're trying to take heaven and put it on the earth, it's a little bit hard to translate. But he tried. And he was like, guys, you're not going to get this, but that's okay because I'm sending Holy Spirit. Yeah. And then you're going to get it. And it's going to be so good. So if today you're sitting here and you're like, what is she saying? Then you can be like, Holy Spirit, you're somewhere in this room. We felt it during worship. We felt it in the room. So show me, reveal to me, tell me the truth. Right? And so in Acts, we finally see the disciples be like, oh, this is what Jesus was talking about. Because now they have the Holy Spirit. So all of this happens. Jesus tried to prepare his disciples, and shortly after this, he gives them this great speech, this great pep talk. He's like, I know you guys it's going to be hard, but I believe in you. I am praying for you, right? All of John 17 is Jesus' prayer for his disciples. He's saying, I am on your side. I am fighting for you, and I believe you can make it. And they still don't understand, and they let themselves think the worst. When Jesus dies on the cross, the disciples go home and hide. They're super discouraged, they're super scared, and they don't know what to do. There's even a point where they just go back to their old jobs. They're like, well, what did we do before we hung out with Jesus? We were fishermen on a boat, so let's just go catch some fish, I guess. Because they got so discouraged, right? And how many of us have received a promise about who Jesus is, and then he doesn't show, or he's silent, and we think, well, I'm just going to go back to what I used to do before I knew Jesus. Well, I used to go to depression, so I'm just going to go to that because Jesus didn't show up. I used to go to pornography, So I'm just gonna go there because Jesus let me down. He's not here, right? On Thursday, they ate dinner. On Friday, he was arrested and killed. And on Saturday, silence. All of their questions, all of their doubts, they just hung in the air. And the person that they would go to answer their questions is gone. So they're just sitting in their questions. And I think a lot of us are living in Saturday. We know Jesus died for us in the past. We know there's supposed to be some kind of hope tomorrow. But today, we sit in our homes attempting to go about our lives, and we have no answers. Everything we hoped would happen has failed. All the things we wished we would be, or all the ways we hoped God would show up, are just on the floor around us because they didn't happen. They're impossible. There's no way that God could possibly have an answer to this. Or worse, God's turned out to be nothing like what he promised he would be. And he gave me all this false hope, and all I have to show for it is a broken heart. That's where Jesus' friends were. Their heart was broken for following this man. They asked themselves, could the past 3 years have been a waste? Could the religious leaders be right? Does anyone know what he was talking about when they took him away? Why didn't he let us defend him? How could this happen? We thought he was the one, and now he's dead. I think some of us have had that moment with Jesus. I thought you were the one. I thought you were going to change everything, but I'm in the exact same place I was. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So some of the disciples, they ran and hid. Some of them denied ever knowing him, and some of them came back to the scene of the crime. I want to tell you about the one that did. John 20, verse 1 says, early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. She came back. I don't know, in the midst of heartbreak, disappointment, and confusion, this woman came back to the last place she saw Jesus. And she came with all of her unanswered questions. She came with all of her broken heart, all of her disappointment. You could say she came to mourn. Maybe she came to yell at God. Maybe she came to cry. But I think she came because she knew what Jesus was like. She'd experienced his power firsthand. He had set her free, and she followed him and witnessed countless miracles, including the resurrection of Lazarus, right? So she came here because, what if she came here because this was the only place that there were answers? I wonder if she brought her heartbreak to the place where hope was buried in hopes of seeing him resurrected. In hopes of seeing her own heart resurrected. Maybe she remembered what he said. And maybe she was hoping that he was telling the truth. And maybe you're sitting here hoping, I hope Jesus is telling the truth about me. I hope he can actually set me free. I hope he actually holds the key to my depression. I hope he actually has joy and life abundant. I hope he has a purpose for my life. I hope I wasn't an accident. I hope he meant for me to be here today. I hope. So maybe that's you today, and your heart has been broken and hope has been dashed, and you're not really sure if Jesus is going to show up. Do you dare show up to the last place you saw him? Do you dare to try and see what he could do next? Do you want to know what happened next? So it says, so she weeps, she goes to get the other disciples, and she's like, Peter, John, he's gone. Somebody stole his body. I don't know what happened. And they come back, and there's this whole thing where John's like, the disciple that Jesus loved ran faster than Peter and got there first, because that's what he's thinking about. And so they get there to the tomb, and they're like, it's empty. Oh my gosh. And then they run off and go back. And Mary's still there with her grief, and she's weeping. And so The next thing it says, she turned to leave, and then she saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her. "Who are you looking for?" She thought he was a gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you put him, and I will go and get him." And he says, "Mary." And she turns and cries out, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And he says, "Don't cling to me, for I haven't yet ascended to my Father, but go find my brothers and tell them I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to your God and my God." Okay, hold on, time out. So I never used to understand why he was like, "Hold on, Mary, don't touch me." Like, I'm still like not quite fully here. And I used to be like, what does that mean? And I heard someone say, Jesus saw his friend that was brokenhearted, and he interrupted his ascension to the Father to heal her broken heart. He was saying, time out. Mary's heart is worth me taking a stop in the garden. Your heart is worth him taking a stop. Taking a stop in this room, taking a stop with whoever it is that invited you here today. Your heart. Jesus is saying, time out. I know you've heard I run the universe. I know you've heard I do all these things, but your heart is worth my time. That's Jesus. He's the one that sees you crying and is like, I'm going to cry with you. This is really hard. And he's like, and I have all these plans. I'm going to ascend, I'm going to bring down the New Jerusalem. I'm going to do all these things. But first, I'm going to go comfort my friend. Because she's crying in the garden. And I know that if I just say her name, she's going to be okay. If she just knows that I'm here, she's going to be okay. So she came and she saw the gardener with fire in his eyes. And who knows, maybe you've met a teacher with fire in her eyes or a parent with fire in their eyes. That's Jesus. He doesn't show up the way that we thought he would. The disciples thought he was going to start a war. Instead, they watched him die. But little did they know what he was doing in the silence. In the silence and the stillness of Saturday, Jesus was defeating the power of sin and death. When they saw him in a grave, he was waging war on hell. Okay? So when you and I see silence in our lives, when you and I don't see the presence of God, when you and I are like, God, I prayed for this and this to happen and it's not happening, he's like, just hold on a second, baby. I'm defeating these demons. Okay? Just give me a day because I am slaying the generational curses in your life. Okay? I can't let you start a marriage carrying all this baggage. I can't let you enter a new job carrying all of this. I am clearing the way because I actually want you to have life and life abundant. I want you to walk in resurrection power. So excuse me while I kill off sin and death in your life. So if you're experiencing the silence of God, it is not the absence of God. It's not. And so for those of us who think that Jesus has much bigger things to do than stop and talk to us, to those of us who think our heart is too broken, our lives are too messed up for him to meet us, I give you the Jesus that I know today. The Jesus who longs to call you friend. Not convert, not Christian, not servant, friend. If you are willing to come to the last place you saw him with all of your questions, disappointment, and heartbreak, I know you will find God wrapped in flesh waiting for you in the garden. Silence does not have the last word here. Hope does. Jesus does. Are you willing to give him the last word in your story. Let's stand. And I want you to think about all of the things in your life that you think Jesus is too busy for that. Jesus is not excited about that. I'm just going to hide my dirty feet because Jesus can't wash them because they're not cute. And I want you to remember who Jesus really is. He is not the God of religion that is waiting with a hammer to beat you up until you get it right. He is the God-man who came and experienced every single human thing. If you've been lonely, he was lonely. If you've been angry to the point that you didn't know what to do, he was angry to the point that he didn't know what to do. If you saw injustice around you and your heart wept, he saw injustice around him and his heart broke. He wept over an entire city. He wept over his friends. If you feel like people don't understand you, he gets that. If you feel like your life has been touched by death and there is no way to undo its mark, he literally went to the grave and came out. It could not hold him. He had to decide to stay dead. Think about it. He is life itself. For him to stay dead for a full day takes power. He had to decide, I am not going to come out of the grave until I slay the power of sin and death for each one of us here. So I just want to invite you. What would it look like to let Jesus have the last word? What if what your parents told you about you isn't true? What if what your teacher said about you isn't true? What if what your mirror says about you isn't true? What if what Instagram and all the followers and not followers and comments, what if all of that is not true? What if all of those deep, dark thoughts in the corner of your brain are not you? It's not. This is not your personality. This is not who you are. So I just want to ask you to ask Jesus, who did you make me to be? What do you say about me? What is the story you want to tell in my life? I don't want to agree with the story of depression anymore. I don't want to agree with the story of self-pity anymore. I don't want to agree with the story of addiction. I don't want to agree with the story of divorce and adultery and sexual immorality. I don't want to agree with that anymore. That is not who you made me to be. That is not my inheritance. I don't want to agree with the less than and the worthlessness and the inadequacy, Jesus. That is not your story. That is not what you say. So right there where you are, ask him, what do you say about me? What do you say about me? I want to know. I want to know. Because your blood, his blood, speaks a better word. It speaks a better word. So just where you are, just ask him.